My guest today is Victoria. She's a psychic medium who communicates with spirit on a daily basis. And today she's going to share that with us. Victoria, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to be here with you today, having a talk about spirit and my connection to spirit, which I love. It sparks so much joy for me because I've been able to do it my entire life. So it's nothing new for me. And it's just something that is just like an everyday normal thing for me. And it always, it's one of those things when people can't speak to spirit, I'm just a bit like, oh yeah, other people can't do that, it's like so frequently and as easily as I can.
Okay, well, you can start wherever you want, whatever you feel like is most relevant to the story or experience, and the floor is yours.
Perfect, thank you. So I've been able to connect since I was a little girl. So I was about 18 months old and I was in the back of the car and I was crying, and we were going past a house along a country road. There was just a house there, just in the middle of nowhere, and I stopped crying and I pointed to the house and said I was a little girl and I lived in there and I was murdered and buried in the garden. And I have done some investigations since then, and there's nothing that's come to light from that part of it. There's nothing newsworthy that has come forward that I've been managed to unearth, but that was my first kind of connection with spirit and having voiced that to other people. And so during the rest of my kind of childhood, I had invisible friends, which were obviously not invisible to me, but they were invisible to other people. So I would be making drinks for them, and my mum would be like, why are you making drinks, extra drinks? I was like, oh, it's for, Melissa, and it's for this person. And she'd be like, there's nobody there. What's going on? And then when I was around about 8, I went with my mum and her friend to Spiritualist Church, and the medium that was there pointed me out and they said, oh, you can connect to spirit. You should be up here. One day you'll be doing this as a living. And I was like, I don't really know what that means, but that's really exciting. That's cool. I quite liked that validation. And we visited a few more times on different occasions, and a different medium each time would pick me out and say exactly the same thing. They would give me a message and say, you should be up here. This is where you should be, because you connect to spirit. And so when I was about 12, we'd started by that point going to Spiritualist Church more regularly and got more connections there. And I started sitting in Spiritualist Circle to start honing my skills. And so that's kind of really where like honing my actual skills and connecting to spirit really started, was sitting in Circle. And so I sat in Circle for different circles for around about 10 years, the last one being a physical circle. So we wanted to get physical phenomena to come, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But yeah, so I sat in Circle for many years, getting different energies, working with different people, getting through different parts of spirit guides, learning about spirit guide teams, all those amazing things, and having such amazing experiences with the other people that were in the circle with me. And so yeah, and at that time I never really spoke to other people about connecting to spirit. It was one of those things that was something that we did. I used to sit with my parents in Spiritual Circle, but it wasn't something I ever spoke to other people about, because it's, people used to think that was a bit weird. So I didn't really speak to other people about it. And even up until just before I started doing this as actually, my full-time gig, people didn't really know. Like, I worked as a dental nurse for 23 years. People didn't know unless they knew me really well. We had that connection, or they mentioned that, they were into spiritualism. And then I would explain my connection and what had happened and how I've spent years doing it. But until that point, nobody had ever really knew about it. And it wasn't until we had a psychic medium as a mediumship evening for people at my last job, and she gave everybody a past loved one, and then she came to me and she was like, why are you not doing this? You could have done this for the people. And I'd not connected to spirit in a way that was intentional, kind of from sitting in Circle to that point, because it was kind of not frowned upon, but it wasn't the norm, I suppose. And so it's something I just kind of was like, oh no, it's fine, yeah, I can connect to spirit, but that's not something that I'm doing now. So, you know, but as anybody that connects to spirit knows, like, there's no hiding from spirit. They'll get it out of you one way or another. So whether you think that you can keep your secrets of, you know, your talents hidden, they will always come out. So spirit will always find a little in to get you to express and do their work, which is powerful.
Yeah. Do you feel like when it, because I spoke with somebody, I think it was yesterday that I had a guest on who was experiencing like people from the other side, ghosts and whatnot. And I was kind of trying to help her because she seemed a little bit lost. And the kind of the same thing that I asked her, do you feel like the first time you started experiencing it, you were being pushed in the direction of honing these skills for a reason, or do you think you were just randomly born with the ability for no reason, you know?
I think everybody has got the ability to be psychic, and it's whether it's been encouraged and it's been allowed to grow or not. Very much, you know, my family, when I speak to my mum about it and we were kind of talking about it as a family, it goes back to her nan used to go to Spiritualist church. They used to have Ouija boards and things like that. And so they were very much into kind of doing herbs, and, you know, what people are doing now is, you know, trendy kind of spells and stuff like that. She was doing that kind of thing back all that time ago. So I think it's whether it's encouraged or not. And mine was very much kind of allowed to grow and encouraged to do that. And I know a lot of people, you know, their kids will say, you know, we grow down from spirit, so we're connected, we're the most connected to spirit when we're born. And so it's really powerful when you allow that to grow. So I've had my daughter say to me before, Mummy, there's a lady over here in the corner. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I've said, oh, you know, is she nice? Like, ask her some questions, like, what's her name? She's told me her name. And I've said, oh, does she make you feel comfortable? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's okay, that's fine. We've encouraged it. She knows what I do. She knows I talk to dead people, is essentially what I say. I'd like, you know, I speak to past loved ones. And she's told me before that she was my mum in a past life. She's spoken to me before about her other mummy that died when the mummy was 33, and then she came to be with me. So she's spoken about those things, and I've not encouraged it, but I've not discouraged it. And I think that's very, you know, when I see lots of people in moms groups and things like that say like, oh, my kid's doing this, and they're like, oh no, I've shut it down. And that's the instant thing where it appears to be something that's abnormal. It's something that shouldn't be encouraged. And I think for me, it was not discouraged, and I enjoyed it, and it comes naturally to me. And so I think we're all chosen. We're all here for a divine reason. We're all here having this experience. We're all meant to be meeting at certain points in our journey. We're all here to provide something, to learn something, to give something to other people. And so spirit aren't here kind of coercing us to do things. They're here supporting us to live our best life. And if we can have that support from spirit, giving us that guidance to where we are meant to be going and what we're meant to be doing, then happy days. That's what I say. If we're going to get there a lot quicker, collapsing time, rather than people kind of, you know, amble scrambling, doing the day-to-day things of just life and not seeing the fact that there's a whole, you know, world around us that we're not experiencing.
Yeah. When you say you talk to them, is it like a telepathic communication or like an audible voice that they use?
So I can hear them, and I can see them, and I can sense them, and I can feel them. And there's been some, when you work with spirit, it's really powerful, because the more it's like any relationship, the more you connect together, the more the trust grows. And one of the main things with working with spirit that a lot of people find is the lack of trust that they have with what they're receiving. So they're expecting somebody to come up and say like, hey, Victoria, it's Jeff here. Just tell him that, I'm here and he's left like the oven on. It's not like that. It's more of a, when I see it, it's more like in my mind's eye, it's more how you would see a dream, that real vivid colors. And it's really interesting because, when you have a dream and it looks like Disney World, it's like trying to explain Disney World to somebody, but it comes out and it sounds really boring. And that's what it's very much like when spirits show you things. And there's a lot of questions that go on. I don't ask questions out loud anymore because I don't need to, because we have that kind of trust and communication. But I'll absolutely be asking questions in my head. So when information comes in, I'll be, if I can't understand it, or I'm trying to decipher, did you mean this or did you mean this? Then I'm asking those questions in my head, like you do when you're having your own thought process. But I know that they're not my thoughts because they're not things that I am thinking about. So it's very difficult, I think, for people who maybe come into it a bit later in age, of that, is this my thought? Is it somebody else's thought? Am I hearing this from someone else, or is this being given to me? And that's one of the things I think when you work with spirit, you have to really trust them and trust that you're giving the right information.
Yeah, because I know that's how it is for me, because like with what I do for a living, you've probably heard me tell the story, but I didn't plan it. It kind of happened by accident, even though nothing's ever an accident. But
Nope.
and I still struggle with having that trust,
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why, one of the many reasons, not the only reason why, when I do readings for people, it's not done in person. I mean, it's just that scheduling is just so crazy. I've tried it before. But another reason is, like, if I put myself with you looking at me, I start overthinking it and freaking out. But whenever I just put myself in the state of mind, like, I'm just talking to my phone, it doesn't matter, then it flows easier,
Absolutely.
What is some advice that you would have for somebody who is trying to develop this and hone in on this?
Is to trust what you're given and know that spirit will only ever give you what you are capable of doing. And so, previously when I worked in Circle, I had this time when it came through, and it wasn't until afterwards I realized it was a rescue that had come through, and I was only about 17, I think. And what had happened was, when we'd all gone to meditate, I could just hear thumping music. So like, when a car goes past and it's got music booming out, so I could hear that, and I felt like I was lying on the floor, and I could feel what felt like blood. So it felt hot and wet and sticky on my face, but I could just hear this blaring music, and it just, the whole thing kind of didn't necessarily freak me out. It didn't make me feel very comfortable. And so when we came back into Circle and I explained, and then the lady who was in charge of the Circle said, actually, that was a rescue. And what you should have done was really said, I've got this situation, and we would have helped them move over to the other side. So that wasn't something that I was very comfortable with. And so Spirit they have given me a couple of them since. Thank you, Spirit. But it's like testing how much you can cope with. It's like when you start a job. When you're capable of doing one thing, they'll give you the next thing. And then when you're capable of doing that task, they'll give you the next thing. And that's very much with spirit, is that you must always give what you get, not how you interpret it. So for instance, if you were given pink rubber ducks and you're like, I've never seen a pink rubber duck, but I've seen a yellow rubber duck. And then you say to somebody like, I've got yellow rubber ducks here. And they're like, no, I can't really place it. But if you say, I've got pink rubber ducks, they're like, oh my God, yeah, that was such a funny thing. This thing happened. And so it's really about taking your own understanding out of it, and just knowing that when you're giving the message, you're giving what is told to you. So it's like Chinese whispers. If I tell you something and say, like, this is how you got to convey it, it's got to be from how I've said it to you, not how you interpret it, if that makes sense. And like tweaking it to make logical sense to you, because sometimes I give messages and I'm like, I have no idea what that means, it's not a message for me, so as long as you understand it, that's fine. And they're like, yeah, I understand it. And always understand, when you come from that place of giving a message, for me, I'm always like, the message is the message. I never retract a message. I would never ever retract a message, because what I'm given, I'm with certainty that that message is for that person, and that's the message that you need to hear. So if it maybe doesn't resonate with them right now, very, very seldom does that happen with anybody says like, oh, actually, I'm not really sure about that. I always say, take the message, because you'll place it either in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks. That will drop in. And usually then in my inbox, I get people messaging going like, hey, you know, you did that reading the other day and it didn't make any sense. It's just happened. And so it's really about having that trust and that, you know, execution of, this is the message. And so allowing yourself to be out of your comfort zone. So having that thing where it is uncomfortable that somebody's facing you, but it's actually easier because you're feeding off their energy. I find when I do audio readings, which I do quite a lot of those, it drains your energy quite quickly. Whereas when you're with the other person in the energy, you can actually feed off their energy, and then they can ask questions or you can elaborate and they'll say, oh yeah, this happened. And so it just really kind of gives them the full picture of what's happening. So it's just about trusting how you see things, and know that spirit won't give you something that you don't understand. From my point of view, they don't give me something that I don't understand, like, you know, crazy words or situations that don't make any sense to me, because it has to be from something that I can make sense of to explain, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I've talked to people before who have mentioned that it's possible for other beings on the other side, maybe that are on the dark side, to mess with you and play with you. Have you ever heard of that? Is that possible?
So recently I had a negative entity attach itself to me, which was not a great experience, it has to be said, and not something that I have any experience with getting rid of. That's not my zone of genius. So I did have to enlist somebody who does that as a job to help get rid of them. It was an intergalactic being apparently, but they latched themselves onto me. So I went to Glastonbury, which I'm not sure if you've heard of Glastonbury, but it's the most spiritual place in the UK. It's full of crystal shops and full of healers and psychics and all that kind of beautiful things. And basically, me and my friends met there, and the Airbnb that we were in had not a great energy in one of the rooms, and apparently seemed to take a liking to me and latched itself onto me. And so that was really, really uncomfortable for me, because it then came into it came into lots of different parts of my life, and it drains your energy, and it drains the energy of people around you, from my own experience. So it's happened to me twice before. The first one was not as bad as this last one. The last one was not pleasant at all. I mean, neither of them were pleasant, but this last one was on another scale. And so it had to be removed by, as I said, somebody that deals with that kind of thing and who dissipates the energy. It's a lady in the US that got rid of it for me.
Have you ever actually seen like a dark negative entity?
No, I've not seen a dark negative entity. And of course, I always do protection and ground my energy. So all the messages that come through are for the highest good of the person. So, you know, giving people what they need, not necessarily what they want, but giving them what they need to support them moving forward. That's very much kind of the ethos of what I do. After I worked in the spiritual circle, I started going to the local spiritualist churches and giving people messages on, you know, in their Sunday services. And very much there, the messages are, you know, I've got, you know, the name of Bob and an anniversary in October, just to kind of validate that there is a spiritual world and that people, you know, are getting messages from spirit. Whereas now what I do is much more giving people what they need to move forward from where they are right now, because everybody needs that kind of direction, that guidance, that clarity. And that's very much more what I do now. But I have not seen a negative entity visually, but I very much felt the raft of it, and it's not pleasant, I can tell you. It brings very intrusive, dark thoughts and starts to have an impact on lots of people around you, from my past experience.
Wow. I had a question I was going to ask you. I forgot what it was. Oh. Have you ever given somebody a message that completely like freaked them out? Like there's no way you could have known that?
Yes, there has been a few instances of giving people messages that freaked them out. I think that one of the messages that stood out for me, I don't remember any of the messages that I give to people. Very like, I don't remember it, unless it's something that's, one little pivotal part of something. And I think there's only two that I kind of remember. One was a lady who what I saw come through was three people stood next to me, and they were the Cray twins, who, I don't know if you know who the Cray twins are, but they're I think it was in the 60s. They were I think like a mob gang, not very nice guys, and a lady called Myra Hinley, who was part of the Morse murderers. And so I had the three of them stood next to me, and underneath it I had mum, dad, and uncle written underneath in like plaques. And I was just like, I was trying to make sense of it, because I said, I've got these three people here and I've got these three tags underneath it. And I was like, and the message that came through was basically the fact that they had been abusing her at some point in her childhood, but had denied it totally. So her memory was that she'd had this really unpleasant time in her childhood, and when she had flashbacks of that as she was getting a bit older, her mum always told her that she was making it up and it never happened, and that she was lying. And it was that pure validation for her that actually what she thought had happened. And it was almost like, literally, like the whole weight of her life had been lifted off her. She was a lady in her 50s, so she'd been carrying this weight around with her for such a long time. And it was just that she was just like, how did you know that? And it was just that, but giving her the gift of being free from all of that. Did it happen? Did it not happen? Did it happen? Did it not happen? Am I making it up? Is my mind playing tricks on me? It was just so beautiful for her to just have that validation that what she was saying was actually right during the whole of her, her life. And now she's able to live her life feeling much more free.
Didn't you say there was one more?
The other one was that was one where I couldn't understand what the message was coming through, and I was like, what is this message? I don't understand. And I was just kept seeing somebody scraping with a knife around a white bowl, and I was like, I just don't understand it. So I was in my head, I was thinking, it's not mushy peas. We get mushy peas here. When you get fish and chips, you get mushy peas. And we have them in little polystyrene pots. And I was like, it's not polystyrene. It's not the same size as ours. I just can't. And I just got this massive waft of fish and chips. Literally, I could smell it. I could taste it. It was on the table in front of me. I could see the whole thing. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've got fish and chips. Like, this very rarely happens when I can smell stuff and taste stuff and all these kind of things. And I said, and I've got this pot, and I'm scraping my knife around. I was like, it's not a mushy pea pot that I've ever experienced. And she said, that is the mushy peas. It's a ceramic pot. I was talking to my mum today my dad today about the trips we had when I was a child, and the mushy peas that we used to have in the ceramic pot. And she was just like, oh my goodness, how did you know that? I'm literally blown away. And I was like, I don't know. And I didn't even know what this little pot was. Like, I had in my head, that's not how we see mushy peas, but I still gave the information that I had. And then obviously they gave me the fish and chips, which I could have quite honestly eaten, but they went there. But yeah, it was just, her whole mind was just blown. And I love it, because when that happens, or something comes out and people are like, oh my God, how do you know that? I'm always like, I'm a little bit blown away as well. It's good.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that, like, oh yeah, that's, Yeah, cool.
So you say you do this for a living. Do you do it on social media, or is it something local where you live?
Yeah, so I do it on social media. So I do card pulls and things on Facebook. And so I do readings for people. My superpower, as I said to you, when you start doing more connecting with spirit and start having that more of a trust, and you kind of gain the next level of your apprenticeship kind of thing. um, I started to see so I was doing readings for people, and I started to see what their problem was. So it's like not the problem that they're presenting with today, but I could see where it was coming from, and I could see the situation that it come from. And I was like, I can see what your problem is. Um, and telling people what their problem is not really that helpful, because now they already feel like a bit out of sorts, and now you've told them what the problem is, and they're now like, well, what do I do with these bits of information? And so it really was that it was like opening Pandora's box basically, and then just saying goodbye, and having to then support them in a way that didn't feel as I wanted to do it. So now I work with people to help them to uncover their blocks, but one-to-one in a container, so that they're supported the whole way through. So it's not about re-traumatizing, but it's about revisiting, reframing. And quite often when people have got stuff going on, they don't know where it's come from. So they don't know, like, oh, it's because I was shouted at when I was 5, or it's because this happened when I was 6, or they sometimes don't see that, or don't feel it, or don't remember it. And it's that I can take them back to that stage and say, this is where it happened. I can tell you exactly where it happened because I'm being shown. And I do a lot of inner child work with people, and I can see what they can see. So I can see how old they are. I can see where they are when they're doing the visualization. And then afterwards, I like to ask them, like, so how old were you? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that. And then I'm like, oh, so where did you find her? And then they tell me, and I'm like, I knew that. But it's just a little bit of validation for me, because again, it's that, that trusting yourself and trusting what spirit's giving you, but also just having that kind of extra validation.
So what is it, just Facebook, or do you have a YouTube channel too?
I do have a YouTube channel at the moment. I just do weekly card readings on there. So every Monday there is a new one for what people can expect to receive in their week. So yeah, I've got Facebook. I've got a Facebook group where people follow me, lots of bits and pieces in there, so people can have one-to-ones with me, or they can join in the card pulls, whatever floats their boat. There's something for everybody.
Cool. Well, I will definitely link all that in the description of this video. Before we wrap it up, would you happen to have a positive message for the viewers?
I've got so many positive messages. So what I would say is, just really allow yourself to, if you want to connect to spirit, allow yourself to be open to connecting, have no expectations, and know that even if you don't feel that you're connecting to spirit, you absolutely are. You're noticing signs, symbols around you, if only you but saw it. So know that your loved ones are around you. And just because necessarily you can't speak to them or hear them, you can speak to them, but you can't hear them maybe as well as some other people are managing to at the moment, you are still surrounded by them.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me. That was an awesome story. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. You have a good day, and I wish you the best.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.